This episode of On the Beat is brought to you by Ingles. Shop online with Ingles Curbside Pickup. New curbside stores opening every week. Please welcome Mike Griffith.
Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beat segment. Always appreciate Ingles. Always glad to come to you on a Monday night. And back from SEC Media Days last week, Connor and I did a couple wrap-up shows. It almost feels like you need a weekend to just absorb everything that came out of there, right? We were in Nashville, and of course, all the coaches were there, and each team bringing three different players. Georgia went last Tuesday with Kirby Smart, Cedric Van Pran, Brock Bowers, and Kamari Lassiter. And, I really enjoyed talking with all three of those guys. Now, I will say I hung around Brock Bowers in the main room more than anyone else, just because I wanted to see how he handled different media and kind of curveball questions. And Brock Bowers is a very savvy guy. He's not a guy that you've seen in front of the cameras doing interviews very much, and he prefers it that way. Someone asked him about it, and he said, I just don't have a lot to say. It's not that he can't do interviews. It's just that he would rather play the game than talk about the game. When he did choose to talk about it, I thought it was really interesting. And I'll start with why he ended up at Georgia. He said Athens. Obviously he wants to win championships and be developed to go to the NFL. And he's got a very good coach to do that with Hartley. And obviously him and Todd Monken had a very good chemistry as far as what Brock Bowers did for Georgia. And I said this once, I'll say it again. I don't believe that Georgia wins either one of the national titles without Brock Bowers. I think he was that important. I think he was that integral. And I don't just say that looking at the numbers, because the numbers themselves, it's not like he had over 1,000 yards receiving. It's not like he had 25 touchdowns, but the offense, and it'll be interesting to see if this is still the case. The offense starts with Brock Bowers. And here's what I mean by that. The other team has to have a plan for number 19. They've got to know where he's at all the time, because this is a guy who can hurt you so many different ways. He can hurt you running the ball. He can hurt you on the short catch and run. He can hurt you downfield, and he can hurt you as a blocker. I think he's underrated as a blocker. I think he's become a really sound blocker. And I don't think that's necessarily his bread and butter, and teams are in the NFL, they're going to send him in there to just mash people. No, I don't think that. But he is a capable and a fundamental guy that gets the job done. So you can't just ignore him as a blocker. You've got to be aware. As a playmaker, though, I think about his catch radius and how many big catches did Brock Bowers make that should have been incompletions. I think about the Florida catch, the juggling catch that was behind him. And you say, how did he do that? You don't see plays like that made in the NFL, much less at the college level. You think about the matrix play. If he doesn't make that incredible stretch in the Peach Bowl semifinal against the Ohio State, Georgia does not win that game. That was a fourth down play that sustained a scoring drive. And obviously Georgia needed every single point to win that game by 1 point. So you take away Brock Bowers, and even going back to 2021, it was Brock Bowers that had that fourth quarter touchdown. And then of course Adonai Mitchell had one too. But he was a guy that, Stetson threw to 16 times in the SEC title game. He had 10 catches for like 100. Whenever Georgia has needed a play, this is the guy. And when I spoke with the TCU captain, D. Winters, at the Senior Bowl, and I asked him what happened, right? Because TCU is very good, better than 65-7. I'm not saying that I think they'd beat Georgia 1 out of 10 times even, but I don't think we would see 65-7, but maybe 1 out of 10 times. I think the other games would probably be closer. If they could do it again, if they could have another chance, maybe they would figure this out. But what the TC linebacker told me was, he said, we couldn't get lined up, could not get lined up. There was a plan in place for Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington, that combination. And I'm going to come back to that, because Georgia's not going to have that combination this season. But once again, it came back to Brock Bowers and how could they stop him? And they didn't. The answer is they didn't stop him. He still had a ton of yardage. He still scored a touchdown. There's just not been another player like this. I guess I would equate him to like the Travis Kelce player on the Chiefs, maybe the healthy George Kittle, the healthy version of George Kittle, the 49ers. Just such a dangerous weapon and a unique weapon, because what do you cover him with? There's not a linebacker that's going to cover Brock Bowers. And most safeties, he's going to be bigger than, and they're going to have a hard time slowing him down. So super impressed with him. And I think he's integral to the team's success. He's on my Georgia Mount Rushmore with Herschel Walker. I put Jordan Davis on there because Jordan Davis is another guy. Georgia does not win a 2021 national championship without Jordan Davis. And without the 2021 title, I don't think you win the 22 title. So two guys, if I had to pick two guys that if you take them away, Georgia doesn't win championships, it's Jordan Davis, not just because of the way he clogged the middle, but because of the leadership that he brought to the field with Devontae Wyatt, another first rounder playing next to him. Those guys were kind of a package deal coming back. And then the leadership that they gave Jalen Carter, who made just huge plays in 2021, as he did in 2022, right? With Nolan Smith providing some of that leadership. But I go Jordan Davis and Brock Bowers is, to me, the two. And now there's other legends. Are you kidding me? Stetson Bennett played big when he needed to in the fourth quarter of those games. I thought he was a capable quarterback. I think of Kenny McIntosh and the things that he did downfield. I think of James Cook and Zamir White, that 1-2 punch, and how steady they were throughout the 2021 season. I think of Broderick Jones at left tackle. Speaking of guys that can't be replaced this year, there's going to be a drop-off at left tackle. There's going to be Jalen Carter. Could you make the argument that you don't win a national? So many of those type of players. You see, you take Chris Smith. How about Christopher Smith? Can you take him away and win? So when we think about Georgia's championship seasons, I think you could make the argument that there's 3 or 4 or 5 guys that if you just pull one of them away, maybe you don't have 2 titles, maybe you only have 1. But Bowers, to me, has been the most important player because there's not another player like him. It's not like, oh yeah, well, he just put so-and-so in there, right? Everybody else, there's some pretty good backups behind for the most part because of the championship depth. There's only going to be one Brock Bowers. I can't wait to see how Mike Bobo uses him. I know that Kirby Smart has talked a lot about how Bobo is really good at getting the ball to key players. And you know that that's going to be part of the game plan for Georgia will be Brock Bowers. So I start there. He's my preseason offensive player of the year in the SEC. He's a preseason All-American. To me, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I can't say enough about the guy, clearly. And then there's Van Pran. And I said this, I don't know what Cedric Van Pran is going to do after football. I don't think he needs to worry about that for a while because I think he'll probably be one of the top 2 or 3 centers taken in the draft. He strikes me as the kind of guy that will have a good NFL career. Knock on wood, provided he stays healthy, such an important thing for alignment. But the leadership in this guy, he just oozes it. And I said, I don't know if Cedric is going to go into politics when football's done. But if he does, I'm voting for him. I don't care what party he is. I don't care what district he's in. I don't care does he go back to Louisiana. I'm fine with it. I'm voting for him. I want Cedric Van Pran as a leader in our society because I liked from the very beginning, the very first interview, I like the way he looks you in the eye when he talks with you. This is a serious-minded young man who has his priorities in order, and he's all business. Kirby told kind of a funny story in Birmingham, about how he's on the megaphone all the time and he's, dogging out people or calling people out. And there was a practice that he didn't think was going the way it needed to go. And he said, you guys aren't giving me everything. I'm disappointed with you. And he said, after practice, Cedric Van Pran put his hand on his shoulder and came up to him and said, Coach, man, I gave you my all, man. That hurt my feelings when you said that, and Kirby kind of thought to himself, I guess I don't really need to be speaking in general terms because he does know that Cedric Van Pran is a guy that gives it his all at each turn. And he is a team captain and he is a great leader and he's a part of the fabric of what's really become an elite program. Now, look, no program is perfect. It's well documented. Georgia's had off the field issues. But when we talk about the locker room culture, and when we saw what happened at Northwestern, the first thing I thought is that will never happen at Georgia. That would never happen at Georgia because of the locker room culture, because of leaders like Cedric Van Pran. and Christopher Smith. Nobody is going to get hazed at Georgia. In fact, Kirby told a story, and he remembered when he was a freshman about getting his head shaved. To him, that was too much. He said that was a lot of drama. That was Kirby's way of saying that stuff. I took it as he didn't think that was cool. And being a former player, he knows what that felt like. And he didn't like it clearly. And that's not going to happen in his clubhouse, number one, just because that is not a team-centric activity. Now, listen, I played sports, and I suppose I was a part of, some moderate hazing, playing sports and in the military. None that I'm going to get into. Nothing as serious as the allegations at Northwestern, I will say. And I didn't find any importance or pleasure or necessity to the hazing process as a wrestler, as a football player, as a military guy. I thought it was kind of ridiculous. It was like, all right, this is just some stupid stuff you get through, right? It didn't do anything for me. I didn't felt like it built any camaraderie. I was not a fan of it either. But again, nothing to the extent of Northwestern. The other thing Kirby said, though, right, beyond just rejecting the notion that this is an okay way to try to put someone through something for acceptance, which again is preposterous, certainly outdated. And I don't know that it was ever appropriate. But he said, look, those guys got to play. And if you're putting a kid through that, this is the guy you need on the field. What if you put Malachi Starks through that? Malachi Starks was integral to this team this year. You think about the win over Missouri and him running somebody down. You think about the play against Oregon early on, momentum-changing interception. Michael Williams is your sacks leader. At Georgia, they recruit such high caliber guys. Like Kirby said, you don't need to divide the team. There's no, why in the world would you do that? You wouldn't, and they don't. And so, the priority that Kirby puts on the connection and the team building is one of the winning edges that Georgia football has, is that connection and the players and the relationships with one another. You see a lot of other programs doing that and saying that, but I think Kirby was one of the first to kind of come out and really use that, strategize that. And listen, he's a tough coach and he's a maniacal coach when it comes to work. But the other thing that he's done that he talked about this offseason was delegating more to his coaches, A, and B, giving his coaches more time with families. If there was one of the criticisms, and you don't write about it and we don't really talk about it, but I still talk with other coaches from other schools, and it was, man, Kirby's like, Nick, he's going to be really hard to work for, because there's just zero time off and yada, yada, yada. I think Kirby's heard that. I think Kirby said that he's done some exit interviews with guys and he's had to listen, and some of the things he heard from other coaches, he didn't really want to hear, but he's honest with himself. And the fact that he now delegates time is brilliant. It's just absolutely brilliant. And it's so important that you do that so you maintain these fantastic coaches. Not that they would want to, fly out of here anyway. They don't. But I like the way Kirby continues to build on his success. He doesn't just stay the same, right? Kirby's constantly changing to get better and looking for ways to get better. That what he said a few years ago at Media Days, I'll never forget it. And I've applied it. I think we all apply a lot of the things we hear from successful coaches. He said, if it ain't broke, find a way to make it better. That's Kirby's way of saying, don't get complacent with the way you do things. Even if you're having success, constantly scrutinize and look for ways to do things better. And I think that's been one of the secret sauces to Georgia, is that this is a program that continues to evolve. It's not like it just plateaus and here's what they are and everybody catches up. No, he's constant because he understands, right? He was at Alabama. He understands Nick Saban, philosophy on this. And Kirby is, a great team builder and a great program builder and a great manager of the roster. I call him the king of roster management. I started saying that, and some people have caught on, some people make fun of it, but I think that's truly what he does. He's like a CEO. And right now in today's game, with the NIL and with the portal, the roster management is more important than anything. Now, that's a term that embodies a lot of things, right? That's recruiting, that's being able to identify talent, that's being able to develop talent, it's being able to retain talent. And that's one of the things Kirby looks at in recruits. What is their retainability, he said. So he is constantly focused on these roster management skills. And I do believe, that's a really important part of what's going on. So those, and then Kamari Lassiter, again, a sort of a, he's not a big trash talking DB. Sometimes DBs, remember DeAndre Baker, they got a little trash talk about him, right? Even Eric Stokes, in his own polite, nice, cool way, had a little something to his game, right? You think about the great DBs, and they always have a little swagger because they got to have a short-term memory. But Kamari is a very business-like guy. I liked what he did in run support. I like how physical he plays. I like his size. I think he's big enough. I think he'll get thicker. I think he has the makings of an NFL corner. And the fact that Kirby chose him to come to media days tells you what the head coach thinks about him. And I remember back when he first came and he was a fall enrollee, and Kirby Smart said he was the start of fall camp. Now that didn't translate to him playing right away, but the fact that the head coach noticed him and noticed his work ethic, I mean, that was the markings that this is a future leader. This is a guy that Kirby Smart has singled out for praise, and he doesn't always do that for freshmen. Some freshmen more so than others. I want to take a look at the All-SEC team. I was talking with my producer, Michael Carvel, about the All-SEC team. He said, man, I don't know if I've ever seen a team with 16 guys and 11 first-teamers. And I'll admit, some of these guys kind of surprised me, but I don't know the rest of the league, admittedly, maybe as well as I should. We focus primarily on Georgia at DawgNation, and I do some other content on SEC-wide stuff, but that's mostly in season. Out of season, you might see Lane Kiffin or Jimbo Fisher or Nick Saban make a few headlines. But for the most part, the focus is on Georgia. So I was really happy to see a lot of these guys get the credit they deserve, particularly Ladd McConkey. I've been saying I think Ladd is the most underrated guy in the league. I guess I can't say that anymore because now he's a first-team pick. Let me tell you, he deserves it. He's the high, of all the players on the team, Ladd had more total offensive yards than any of the returning players. That's right. Even more than Brock Bowers. Because remember, he was a punt returner too. And I don't know that he's going to be in the return game this year, but I know this. Last year, he was only completely healthy for about half the games. He had a little shoulder, he had a little foot, a little knee. I think now that Ladd is 100%, I think I'm going to say it's a big comparison, right? I'm not saying that he's this guy, but he's Christian McCaffrey-like in the open field with his quickness. And he runs through people, deceptive strength. I just think he's fantastic. I think he's going to have a huge year. And I was happy to see him get his recognition. I love the story. I think most of you know the story. 3-star guy, really liked Tennessee. Jim Chaney never made an in-home visit for whatever reason. And Kirby was the only Power 5 guy at the table, and it's a national championship program. And there's Kirby at a high school game, watching Ladd McConkey. Kirby Smart seeing something that nobody else could see. And I thought that was it's a fantastic testament to Kirby's ability to evaluate players and character. Because Ladd McConkey has turned into that poster boy guy, not just on the field, but also off the field. And Georgia needs that off the field, in the classroom guy that you can hold up and say, okay, here's a guy that does it all right on the field, but this is a guy that goes to class. He graduated in 3 years. And the way he represents with fans and carries himself, you got to have guys like Cedric Van Pran, like Ladd McConkey, like Brock Bowers, like Kamari Lassiter. So very well-deserved honor. Of course, Brock Bowers was first team. Amaris Mims, good for the SEC for recognizing that even though this big dog didn't start till the end of last year, he has a presence. And I like how much Amarius, how much responsibility and accountability Amarius took after the season. When I interviewed him in the locker room and asked him, well, whatever happened with the Florida State? He said, look, I was young. I made a mistake. My teammates welcomed me back. Just took that experience and grew from it. Didn't try to renegotiate going into this year, right? Just took that experience, grew from it. And now I believe Amarius Mims is a first-round NFL talent, even as a right tackle. I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think this is going to be the best offensive line that Kirby's had probably in a few years since you had the 2 number 1 draft picks with Isaiah and the left tackle Anthony. Cedric Van Pran, we talked about him, best center in the country. How about Tate Ratledge getting some credit, right? And Tate will tell you, going into last year, he really wasn't 100. You're going to see a healthier, better Tate Ratledge this year. You're going to see a more physical Tate Ratledge this year. This is another guy who has big time NFL talent. Really excited to see him. And that's just offense. My goodness, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys on offense. Did you ever think you'd see the day? Defensively, man, they're loaded. How many guys we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys on defense. Michael Williams, the sacks leader. Yes. Nazir Stackhouse, I don't know. I don't know if I believe he's one of the 2 best tackles in the league. I'm just going to be honest with you. He is on the NFL radar. He's not a first-round pick. He may be a second-day guy. Jamon Dumas-Johnson, yes, they got that one right. I think he's fantastic. Malachi Starks, yes, obviously a playmaker. If Malachi can make a jump from freshman to sophomore year, oh my goodness. Maybe the best set of safeties in the country. Javon Bullard also, they really like that pick. And then we mentioned Kamari Lassiter. So that's a pretty strong first team. I was a little surprised when we talk about second team picks. Smile Munden was second team. Some people will tell you that they think Smile is a better NFL prospect than Jamon Dumas-Johnson. I think they're both fantastic. I think when they're on top of their game and they're healthy, I believe that might be the best, duo of inside linebackers in the SEC, but we have to wait and see where Smile is at with his injuries. Maybe that's why he slipped second team. How about Jalen Walker getting third team? Did that open some eyebrows? I mean, he's only been on the field for a minute, already getting preseason mention over a lot of veteran players that have been there and done it at other schools. Second team offense, Kendall Milton and Xavier Truss. You could have made the case for Dejan. Didn't see him anywhere. Now, for all the guys that Georgia had, there's still some guys that were missing. How about Brett Thorson? You telling me the Australian punter doesn't belong on the all SEC team, first team, second team, or third team? That's a miss. Dominic Lovett, he's got to be on the first team, second. Maybe because he's a transfer, he got lost in transition there. Tyke Smith is the big one. Tyke Smith is an all-league caliber player. I don't know if he's first team or second team, but he belongs in the conversation. And then we don't see a Georgia quarterback, and we know that's because Kirby's made it clear that the competition continues. Now, I think Carson Beck's going to start the first game. I think he's got the inside track, but I also know that Kirby is not going to just default to Carson Beck. They're going to be competing every day, and it's not necessarily who has the highest ceiling, it's who has the highest floor. And if you know what I mean, like at their worst, who's worse at their worst, Beck or Vandegrift? So I kind of look at it like my theory on it is that Carson has a higher ceiling than Vandegrift right now, but I think Vandegrift has a higher floor than Beck, because if things go bad, Vandegrift can run. And I don't think he's as prone to interceptions as forcing the ball. I also don't think that so far that we've really seen his arm talent, because I think Brock said he's still thinking about where he's throwing the ball. So we maybe haven't really seen what he can do, but I like Beck's arm talent. I mean, Beck has an NFL arm. I think Carson Beck is going to be on an NFL roster next year. I think he's that talented, but I thought that about Jacob Eason too. And it was Jake Fromm. Eason got hurt, but moving forward, Kirby went with the quarterback who had the better decision-making, right? And Jake put him on the doorstep of a national title. If the safety doesn't get fooled on the look-off by Tua, Jake played good enough to win a national championship that year. Didn't have to do a lot, but again, Kirby doesn't want his quarterback in a position to have to do a lot. That's part of the formula for Kirby, is to try to take it off of one guy's shoulders. And you might see Alabama go back that way, by the way, because with Bryce Young, as incredibly talented as Bryce is and was, no national title for Bryce Young as the starter. Which is kind of telling, right? When we look at the different systems. The other things that happened at SEC Media, I did speak at SEC Media Days. I got to be on stage. I represent the Football Writers Association of America, FWAA.com. You can go to that if you're a blogger. You can join bloggers, writers, television people, radio people. And I got to speak on that. And Michael Carvel has a clip. Michael, if you could play a little bit of that.
I would encourage you to continue to network. I hope you'll go to fwa.com. When you get this guide, you're going to want to thank Ted Gangen. He's edited this guide for 25 years. I think most of you know Ted from collegepressbox.com. I believe they've worked with the SEC since 2009. I believe they've been contracted with the league. So it's been a great organization. I'm really proud to be a part of it. Again, if you'll just take some time and go to fwa.com, I promise you it'll be worth the $50 entry fee. And do take the time to get to know people and network in an event like this. It will prove invaluable and I believe very fulfilling. So thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Welcome back. You can see just a little bit there. I was a little nervous on stage, but it's pretty cool. Nick Saban was right behind me. So that I was a little nervous about that. I'm not going to lie. But I enjoyed that. And I enjoy representing DawgNation as well on the stage as a member of the Football Writers. I was a president of the organization back in 2007. I was their National Beat Writer of the Year in 2018. And last year I had the second place column in the nation. It's the only thing Stetson Bennett didn't win. Blame me. I was the writer. But I did a column on Stetson, and many of you read that. The headline was, of course, there's no quit in Stetson Bennett. And obviously Stetson was a fantastic guy to write about. I think the story that beat me for the best column of the year was on Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. So did my best. Sorry, I let Stetson down. It's the only thing he didn't win. And like I said, I'll take the blame for it. But that is award-winning content. I just had to tell the story because you guys know that is one hell of a story. It's still one hell of a story. Some other things I noted from there. Tennessee came out of there with a lot of confidence. In fact, I posted a story earlier today that they expect to win the East. I mean, it's one thing to feel that way. It's another thing to publicly say it. It's kind of like the Alabama lineman Leighton that was like the trench king that said that Alabama is still the standard. I mean, I love it when the players, and I say this too, I want linemen to be the ones making these outlandish statements because during the game, you never hear from an offensive lineman. If anybody's going to have a green light to talk trash in SEC media days, it needs to be a lineman because the big guys never get any love. They never get any attention unless we're going, oh, look, who beat him for a block? Who beat his block to get a sack? You never really say, oh my gosh, let's do a replay on that great pass block. So I didn't mind the trench king, the self-anointed trench king in Alabama any more than I meant this Tennessee defensive lineman that said we expect to win these. I think that's fun. I hope they think that. But of course we're going to point it out, right? Because if you're a Georgia fan or you follow Georgia, like, oh my gosh, can you believe something? Well, that's what they're supposed to think. But it was funny. Josh Heupel basically said, I told you this was going to be a speed bump. It was a speed bump. Tells you that Tennessee was very thrilled that they didn't get a bowl ban out of the Jeremy Pruitt related sanctions. Pruitt, of course, given a 6-year show cause, which I think is ridiculous when I look at what's happening in college basketball and Bill Self and getting a lifetime contract and all the things the FBI finds. And yet the basketball guys walk like it's nothing. And a football guy gets a 6-year show cause. I think that's preposterous. $60,000. I mean, I don't even know what that buys in. Does that even get you a backup center now in the portal or on recruiting? The whole thing to me, the way the NCAA shifted it onto Pruitt, and really the school didn't get a whole lot. I mean, they paid a $9 million fine, or an $8 million fine. It's a drop in the bucket at Tennessee. That's what they spent on the quarterback, right? Allegedly. So not that I want to see any team get punished, especially the guys that are there now that didn't have anything to do with it. But I just felt like it was not an equal punishment. And I don't have the answers, so I probably shouldn't complain. I don't know what I'd say I should have, would have done. I guess my takeaway was I thought a 6-year show cause was excessive. I think that's too much. That's someone's livelihood, man. And, there's other ways to punish people, but 6 years that's too much. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Pruitt challenge that in some way, shape, or form, since it's such an unprecedented penalty in the college football ranks, or at least, compared to what we saw happen to the basketball coaches that got caught by the FBI on tape doing things, for goodness sakes. Florida, the talk about Florida was that there wasn't a lot of talk about Florida. Everybody's walking around going, can you believe we're not talking about Florida? Can you believe there's not a storyline? I said, here's your storyline. If Napier has another losing record, he's gone. Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so. With the AD, I said, no, I'm telling you, Florida fans can say whatever they want, but if Florida has a third losing season in a row, that guy's gone. He's got to show some promise. He's got to beat somebody. He's got to beat Florida State. He's got to beat Georgia. He's got to beat Utah. He's got to beat Tennessee. Florida fans don't want to hear it. And I like Napier. I think he's a good guy and an okay coach. I don't think he's a bad coach. He's probably a solid coach. And it does take time to get guys in there. But you got to have the charisma to sell it. And I don't sense the charisma. I see a nice guy and a proper guy. But I don't think nice and proper is going to get you another year if you don't finish over 500. So keep an eye on that and how loud the drums are beating for Billy Napier in Florida. Alabama, Nick Saban gets up there and, well, what that Italy trip was a 50-year, gift, anniversary gift. And he was able to get out of it twice, but he wasn't able to get out of it again. And it's like, he's apologizing for going to Italy for however long on vacation. Look, don't apologize, just, perform. I mean, what if one of his players said, oh, coach, it's something my parents got for me in high school graduation, so I missed a week of camp. Do you think that would wash? So, and the reality, it's brutal. It's brutal. Being a college coach is brutal. It's full of sacrifices. But while Saban was over there, Kirby was putting together number one class. Now, maybe Alabama will pass him. I think their average player rating was a little bit higher right now, but they don't have the number of commitments. There's a long way to go to the finish line recruiting, by the way. Long way to go. Point is, Kirby was hustling this summer while Saban was in Europe, and Saban tried to address it. I just didn't think it came off really well. He also skipped his Radio Row interviews. When I went on the SEC network last week, I brought that up the night before. I said, look, this is a problem because SEC Media Days is the one day a year where all the media turn out and have an opportunity to talk to coaches and players. And listen, Kirby did all that. Kirby he did Radio Row. He did all the interviews. He was fantastic. And he had as hard of an offseason as anybody. So you're telling me Saban couldn't do it? And I joked, I said, well, maybe he was trying to save his energy. I don't think it was that. I don't think Nick Saban wants to talk about not winning the national title with Bryce Young and Will Anderson. You had arguably the best offensive and defensive players in the country. I still think Jalen Carter's better than Will Anderson. But my point is, you had two incredible top 10 picks, and you couldn't win a title. Okay, they lost 2 close games. Well, they also won some close games. Alabama, this is a big year for Alabama with new coordinators. There's big questions. I don't know that Texas is that much of a test in Tuscaloosa earlier this year. We'll find that out, because I'm not sold on Steve Sarkisian either, by the way. But I thought that was interesting. The Texas A&M Jimbo Fisher talking to their players. One of the players said that, the locker room culture wasn't good, and they kind of put it on some kids that were making NIL money. You wonder about that. Another testament to how Kirby manages it. 31 Texas A&M players transferred out after last season. 31. Ole Miss, 2 years in a row now, they've taken 13 midterm transfers out of the portal. So what are we going to get from Ole Miss? We don't really know. I know this, the way they faded last year, I think the fact that Georgia plays Ole Miss in November is a really good thing. Now, if the Rebels are winning and they're in contention, I think that could be a dangerous game. But if they're not, Lane Kiffin talked about it. One of the things about getting so many guys out of the portal, so many transfers, is they maybe don't have the same level of buy-in as a kid who's been in the program 2 or 3 or 4 years that's finally getting his chance. And he kind of attributed last year's slide to that. He said, I didn't do a good enough job, but he also mentioned that he thought that might have been somewhat of a byproduct of having so many transfers. So that's something to think about. If Ole Miss is in contention in the West, dangerous game. If not, probably a much easier game than anybody realizes. Missouri 18 starters back. Eli Drinkwitz, kind of low played everything and said, oh, I don't want to make, you know what? Good, because you're Missouri and you don't really have that much to talk about. So I didn't mind him not staying that much because hey, that's the show me state. I'm a show me reporter. You got 18 guys back and you didn't win anything last year. So I don't want to hear from Missouri anyway. Vanderbilt with a wonderful production, whatever. My joke was that, the rumor was they scheduled it in Nashville a few years ago just to make sure Vanderbilt would show up. And, only Georgia people get that, right? Like I said, other people are like, what? why do you pick on Vanderbilt? I said, no, you don't understand. What Vanderbilt did to Georgia in the COVID year will not be forgotten by Kirby Smart. Now he'll tell you, play it like Kirby never forgets, because those kids that year finished one loss short of breaking the record for the most wins by a senior class. And that would have been an honor at that moment. And they had that stolen because of the way Vanderbilt managed the end of the season. Canceled on Georgia, managed to find enough people to play Tennessee, then canceled again. And they canceled late enough a game in the game that Georgia couldn't get a replacement game. And it cost Georgia a win. It was just unfortunate. I know those were tough times for everyone. But at the same time, there was enough players on a football team, and I guess we don't need to rehash it, but I always said, look, this is what walk-ons are for. They're not on the team as decorations or tackling dummies. When they have an opportunity to play, you should play them. So I wasn't buying the not enough guys healthy thing. And it's not like Kirby runs the score up on anybody anyway, unless he's pissed off and he has reason to, which by the way, he did last year. So I'm just saying, I just want to point that out, because typically Kirby will just take the air out of the ball. But there was, like I said, I don't think Kirby's forgotten that one. And it wasn't this coach's fault, by the way. It wasn't the current Clark Lee's fault, but Kirby thinks like a football player still. And I think that's part of why he connects with his team so well, because he's one of them and he gets it and he understands what it's like to be a young man, and he understands the dynamics, and he's got an edge about him. Even though he just soon run clock and run time off the clock, and keep his defense numbers good, and no reason to play more snaps, because it puts you more at risk for injuries, and you want to manage your team to get to the end of the year. Again, remember what I told you, king of roster management. But it's going to be fun this year. I can tell you that, because there was a lot of Tennessee people saying that, Georgia, they only got a field goal in the second half, and it's like, you don't understand. If Kirby wanted to keep the throttle down in that game against it, now this year in Knoxville, just remember, Kirby likes to score points in Knoxville. He wasn't able to beat Tennessee as a player. He really likes to beat him as a coach. That's one of the Auburn, those rivalries, right? Again, part of what makes covering Kirby Smart a lot of fun. Hey, I want to thank everyone for joining me on the show tonight. If you got some comments, throw them down there. You can email me, MikeGriffith032@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter @MikeGriffith32. Don't forget, every day, Brandon Adams during the weekdays, 10 a.m., DawgNation Daily. Jeff Santel will be back this week, before the hedges with his recruiting show. And Connor Riley, Sunday nights, Connor in coverage. I want to thank my producer, Michael Carvel. I also want to take a moment now to thank our sponsor, Ingles, for bringing you the show every Monday night. Couldn't do it without Ingles. Really appreciate Ingles. Let's watch this message from our sponsor, Ingles. And then everyone, make sure you have a fantastic week. Next week, start of the fall practice session for Georgia football.
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.